Good day. Ooh, what do we have here? We have James's Faith left-handed acoustic guitar, and this came to me. James has had this about 10 years and it's in not bad condition. It's been played, it's got some dings here and there on the edges and a few little marks, this was out and flopping all over the place, but it's gone back in okay. Anyway, this is a nice acoustic guitar, and when it came, James sent it down because two things primarily. Mainly, he wanted a setup on it, but the first thing was that he was getting buzzing on all strings, or low strings down here, and it was getting harder to play. So that was the first thing, and then the other thing is the fret ends, he was saying, were a little bit starting to get a little bit sharp. So we wanted to set up and take care of those things. Also on the back, he said that years ago he had to use some medicated cream on his hands, and as a result that the back of the neck had become sticky, some rather sort of soft, and I've seen quite a lot in certain Taylor guitars that I've seen where that's happened too. So what I've done with this, and he wanted this kind of putting right if I could improve that. So what I've done is I've sanded back a little bit on the back to remove the softer stuff, which you could pretty much scrape off with your thumbnail, same as on the Taylors actually. And I guess it's something to do with the waterborne polyurethane finish that they used, reacting with whatever's in the hand creams, maybe even just the water content or something that sticks on there and then kind of retains the water or lets it soak in over time. It might, be a bit like if you submerge this neck in water, what it would do to the finish. Anyway, so I've sanded back a little bit, and what I've done is I've built up, because the colour was in the original lacquer, a lot of the colour of the neck was in the original lacquer, so it's a bit of a mix of things. Rather than strip the whole thing out, because it's obviously a fixed neck and so on, rather than go a whole hog and do a complete refinish, what I've done is I've sanded back a little bit and I've built up the back at the moment in some what is actually gloss waterborne lacquer, just to get it back up to to get rid of the original stuff and replace it with non-ruined lacquer poly. And what I'm thinking about doing on this is I'm going to sand it back at some point. It's pretty level now, but I'm going to sand it back to a matte finish, and then I'm going to or a more satin finish with some steel wool to finish off. And if that looks and feels good, I'll leave it at that. But if it doesn't, then what I might do is I might continue taping off, and I might give it a sort of just a light coating of satin nitro, because I know that gives this kind of feel. Now you can do nitro on top of poly quite successfully, so I hear, and I've done it loads of times. Apparently Fender used to do it on their headstocks, so I'm told. And if you think about it, there's nothing about the nitro that will interfere with the poly. The poly is a kind of fixed thing. It's not curing or doing anything. It's set in its final chemical form. So chucking some nitro on top won't do anything to the underlying poly. So the other thing, of course, about this is over time anyway, is you will get, especially around here, you will get the hands will wear satin finish smooth as well, which doesn't help if you like that rough satin feel, that rougher satin feel. Anyway, so first thing I did with this was, as you can probably see, is I've taken off the truss rod cover, and I could see when the guitar arrived that it was humped, the neck was humped. And I was really interested in that, and asked James about how that might have come about. And it's been played and just kept in its case all its life, and he hasn't made any adjustments. So in its lifetime, this neck seems to have developed a bit of a back bow, which always kind of makes me a bit worried to think about the mechanics involved. Which bit is shrinking, which bit is expanding. Theoretically, for it to back bow, you might say that the upper surface here is absorbing water and expanding, which then kind of forces the thing to bend a little bit. That's one possible way. Or it could be the underside shrinks tightening in, causing the top to bend. I don't understand the mechanics of wood particularly, and I'm not an expert in any sense of that. But I can tell from this top here that it has a bit of moisture content because there's a gap. You know, there's a little bit of bellying, but not much in the top here. So whilst I couldn't really explain why that's developed a back bow, and it was significant. By the time I got it, you literally couldn't play open strings on these notes. So I made an adjustment with the truss rod and had to go quite a long way. But what worried me slightly was that the truss rod did seem to be done up in the clockwise position quite strongly. I think I finally got it to the neutral position and then back a bit away into the counterclockwise, because I think it's a two-way truss rod. Means it creates a positive bend in both directions around the center point, which is relaxed. So I had to unwind it. It was very tight, and I had to unwind it all the way back to the center point, and even that wasn't enough relief. Then I took it back into the positive relief department. Now, at the moment, I've given it a little while to settle. That's probably, it's a bit messed up by having paper on here, and the reason I had paper on here is kind of in preparation for well, while I was lacquering, I didn't want to get anything on the fingerboard. So, but it's about right the way it is now. You need a bit of relief, and there was not only none, but it was, like I say, backbowed quite substantially. So the fact that if it had been backbowed but the truss rod was central or loose, then I would kind of I would think that's the result of the neck changing on its own in atmospheric conditions. But to find it backbowed and the truss rod cranked up where you'd expect it to produce backbow is really odd, and I can't really. All I can think is that at some point when it was first made, a combination of strings, loading, put a big curve on it, and then that was cranked up to flatten that out. And then what's happened is maybe as the water content in the neck has changed over the years, it's lost the, I don't know, it's changed so that that same amount of setting has resulted in a backbow. Because clearly, if James hasn't adjusted it, nobody else has. If that was set in that position, because the truss rod is a physical thing, it's away from its center place or it's not. And if it was where it physically was cranked up, then it must have been cancelling out quite a substantial relief curve when the neck was the guitar was first retailed or manufactured. So, you know, it's clear that it's had to be adjusted, and it may, as a result of that, it may have to be adjusted again. Now, having dialed in or dialed out the back bow first, so it's now gone flat and then slightly relieved now, which is kind of where it should be with a tiny little bit of gap. What that then meant is the action that it first displayed is now somewhat different, because the whole neck is a different profile. Now, don't make the mistake of thinking the truss rod is where you adjust your, this is a common sort of misconception thing. In adjusting the profile of this neck, yes, the action has changed, but to say that is not the same as saying you change your action by adjusting your truss rod. I prefer to be very specific and say that when you adjust your truss rod, your action in different places will change, but consider it a secondary effect of adjusting your truss rod. And the primary reason to adjust your truss rod is to do what we did, which is to put the neck into approximately the right shape for playing, and it has to be either flat as minimum or slightly curved, relieved, or concave, perhaps ideally, because the strings, especially on an acoustic, are going to spin around. If the action's too low and there's not enough relief, then the strings will slap on the frets. So ideally, to get a nice low action but be able to strike the strings, you need a combination of obviously a low saddle height here plus some relief in the neck. If you go for a low saddle height here but no relief in the neck, i.e. it's virtually flat, you might like the feel of it when you're pressing down the frets, but as soon as you strike it, those strings are going to slap on the frets. So it's a combination. If you want this low action, you have to be prepared to have a little bit more relief in the neck. If you don't mind, you're not looking for a particularly low action, then you can get away with the flatter neck because your strings start off higher up. So anyway, just remember, if you're new to this, there are two very different statements. When you adjust your truss rod, your action will change, is one statement. Another statement, completely separate, is the way you adjust your playing action is not primarily via your truss. You don't use your truss rod to do that. You use your truss rod only to set the correct shape of the neck. But it has a secondary effect of changing the way the strings sit and their action, particularly down the middle of the guitar. If you're going to adjust your action, you first of all get your truss rod and your neck relief right, and then you look at what you're left with. And what we see here is the last fret action is quite high. The first fret action is pretty good actually, might not need to do much there. It's a bit sticky, so we might need to just widen the slots a bit. And it's got a tusk nut on there, or tusk material of some sort. And we've got what looks like plenty of room to reduce this saddle down here, and the break angles over even the highest or thinnest string is very good at the moment, so there's no risk. We can get an improvement of last fret action without running into any problems in terms of transmission of tone down at this end. If you reduce that height so far, there's almost no break angle of the string coming up over the pivot of the saddle, then you'll eventually not transmit the tone through to the guitar top, or you'll transmit progressively less through. But there's room in here for an adjustment. The only other constraint in that is how far you can adjust down without running into the inevitable uneven frets which exist on all guitars, pretty much all guitars. On the case of acoustics, my experience is you can actually do you can get down to as low as 2 millimeters here and 1.5 here without expecting to have any choking issues around here. So we can aim for that and shouldn't require any fret work. And the only fret work I've done on here is just to try and soften the edges off a bit. We can also address those with a little bit of sandpaper as well while the strings are off, to try and just soften them out a bit. But short of doing a complete sort of fret level and all the rest of it, where I polish out the frets in a huge kind of progressive range of papers, we can't do quite as much work on just the edges on their own. Otherwise we end up scratching at the frets and have to do the whole fret as if it were a fret leveling, which is a kind of time consuming, more expensive procedure. Looking at these frets, they appear to have been leveled before anyway. Just judging by them, there will have been a factory or a shop level to make this thing play right anyway. I'd expect as a result to be able to take it down somewhat without too much worry. So the first thing I'm going to do is, given that I've already got the relief curve set pretty much where I like it, which is a bit more than none, right? I'm just going to just double check what we've got here in terms of last fret action, and it's kind of pretty much on 2.5 on low E, just a bit over 2.5, like 2.75, and the high E is sitting quite high as well, and that's at 2.25. Now, just straight away, there's room for improvement there. So, at the measure, as I do at the last fret, it's a bit unscientific. People say, why don't you measure it halfway point, which you can do, and I've forgotten where it is. Is it there? 12, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, I don't know where the logo is on this, or what the logo is. Right, the problem is I've got tape on here now, so that's going to make that a bit harder. But let's see. 12th fret action, just for the sake of adjustment, is 1.6 and 2.1. 1.6, 2.1. 1.6, 2.1. The other way around. 2.1. 1.6. Now, the problem is, I don't typically go by, I don't know why I did that, because I don't go by 12th fret action. I tend to go a sort of an eyeballing thing at the last fret. So what that means is, if I think about this as being just under 2/3 of the way up the guitar scale, okay, so we have a sort of halfway point there, right? halfway point again, halfway point again. So the place I'm measuring is, it's just slightly less than 2/3, sorry, slightly more than, we're talking quarters, aren't we? Sorry. It is just a little under 3/4 of the overall length. So when you have when you're looking to reduce, let's say, the action by, let's say, 1 millimetre here, you know that if this is twice the length, the argument will be this will be twice as high. Is that right? Is that the correct reasoning? So 2 millimetres here translates to 1 millimetre there. You'd think. It's probably, is that even scientifically credible? Think about the triangles. You can measure it out, it probably turns out that way. So if that's twice, right, then that's 1.5. That's my theory. So it's a bit under 1.5. So the point is, what I look at is I decide what I want to take off. So from the low E, I want to take, what do I want to take off? 0.75, and from the high E, I want to take off 0.75. Same across each way. Okay. So it's fairly simple. 0.75 millimetre. Blimey, that's not much. Now that's how much I want to take off here, but obviously I have to take more off there because it's more. That's only 1.75. No, sorry, 3/4. 0.75 as much as that. So if you can be bothered to work that out. So I'm going to say, just to be fun, 1 millimetre off either end, off either side of the, or all the way across, will translate down to about, what do we say, 0.5 millimetre there, and 0.75 there. So not quite enough, a bit under 0.75. So let's call it 1.2 mils. Let's translate that again. So 1.2 mils there translates into 0.5 mil there, translates into 9.9 there, 0.7 there. There you go, that was my eyeballing it. So we're going to go 1.2. Now we can go to about 1 and stop and see how it plays. And actually it's better to do that because you'll discover if you get any high fret issues, you want to kind of stop before you get those really. You should be able to hear them approaching. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slack this off, but I'm not taking them right off, but I just want to slack the strings off enough to be able to remove the saddle. Now this is working with would be an under, I don't know what the unit is. Is it a under saddle? It might be a sound board pickup, I'm not sure what it is. But if we remove the saddle and we see a piezo transducer strip under there, then we know that it works by the saddle pressing down on it. So I can see that these strings have dragged through a fair amount of dirt in the slots, which sometimes is a good sign that it just can be a little bit tight. So I just want to see if I can get into here without slacking the strings so much that they all fall off their perch. And sometimes it depends on how deep the slot is and how loose you have to get this, but sometimes you just have to keep on going. That should be alright. So I'm going to make this adjustment on here using these old strings as sacrificial strings. I might get a close-up with my Apple close-up device, my macro camera. So this is good. I want to be able to move these along. They're holding up in their slots a minute. Out you come. Right. Yeah, a little piezo strip under there. So you can see that it's been, somebody's drawn out the line and set this up to begin with to a particular height, which is good. So we're going to start with Get it the right way around. And also, it looks like handmade actually. It's quite nice. Very good. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just move this off to one side. Put it on the stand, I think it's better. And then we're going to bring up the old sanding board. So I'll go for a millimetre, although we kind of know that isn't going to be the full range yet, but we'll go for a millimetre to be conservative. You know that it's going to be even across the way. So a millimetre is a very small amount to take off, and we've got to make sure that we do it in such a way that that not only is it the same all the way across the saddle, but it's also as close as possible leaves the saddle bottom flat in a sort of 90-degree. This is very fine. I mean, this is where imperfections creep in, or user error creeps in, because quite frankly, you kind of measure a millimetre at either end precisely is anyone's guess. Still, we do our very best. So typically what I do is, once I've marked the thing on there, I tend to then eyeball it across to make sure, and I'm pretty good at guessing the uniform thickness all the way across the bottom of the piece. And there we have it. So that's our straight millimetre. So like I said, we've got to take this down in such a way that not only takes it down so this is flat across there, but we also need it flat that way too, 90 degrees. So it sits in the slot and doesn't, at the moment it's tilting backwards slightly, you can see that, so it's not being sanded flat, but we will make sure it is. Now first of all, I'll start off by taking a fair amount off with this rough 80 grit stuff, and just keep an eye on where it's going so that we're getting the same sort of pressure on either side of it. I tend to sort of wobble me from side to side rather than move the workpiece from side to side, because that way I can kind of keep an eye on how perpendicular it is and so on. Okay, so we're heading the right way. Probably better switch this. Yeah, so this is where I do my little dance from side to side. And then as we get closer to the line, obviously I want to make sure that, grossly speaking, that it's square to the edge, which it currently isn't. So I'm just going to pick that lean out of it and get it square to the edge, and then we just want to finish it off down. This is slightly picked up a bit of unevenness, so just need to tailor that off, and then when we get close to it, and finish it on the finer paper, again making sure that we keep the whole thing perpendicular as possible while we're doing it. Looks nice and square to me, so it's just a tiny amount off the mark, but I'd rather take it down, continue to take it down very slowly on this fine paper than to return to the 80 grit and run the risk of taking too much off. There, tiny amount to go, a little bit uneven on this treble side, so I just want to put a little bit more weight on that side. Just to even it out. How's that looking? Very close. And then a little bit across all the sides together. Level it out, make sure. And we can check against the light. It's looking good. A tiny bit uneven. That's depth-wise, that's where we want to go. Fling, and that's about right. Can't hold anything. Yep, it's good. Okay, that's where we want to go. That's a conservative millimetre off. So that gives us a sort of start point, and if my usual approach is if that plays nicely, then I tend not to trouble with it, particularly if it plays nicely and there are no issues with fret, uneven frets or anything like that. Then I call it a victory and move on. Right, there you go, seats in nicely. Out of the way. Okay. So I'm planning, once I've done this bit of the setup, I'm planning to leave the leave this lacquer poly, I should say, it's not lacquer, leave the poly over the weekend, and I don't know what the weather's like, but I'd like to leave it till it's a little bit drier and a little bit less of humid. It's 87 in here, but less humid. So I can do a little bit of nitro spraying in here, but I have to then kind of heat up the shed a bit, and also maybe even get the dehumidifier running a little bit. Okay, so 1 mil should translate down to about, I don't know, 0.65 or something, maybe 0.7, so we should be about right. That's hitting some, why is that hitting that down there? Yeah, I haven't even adjusted that. How strange. What's going on here? This is weird. Let's take a note off here. Oh, the slots are wrong. It's okay. I thought the slots were wrong. They were alright. They were just slack, and that was messing things up. Okay. Phew. A bit more stretching. Stretching mainly because I've had the strings unwound from the pegs, so they're going to store up a bit more slack again. We've got some nice elixirs to go on here. There's room for more adjustment. I'm just going to double check the final heights here. So that's dead on 1.5, and that is 1.75. Okay, is it 1.75? Hang on. What was I aiming for? 1. 2, it's actually 1.885, something like that, so just under 2. No! Ah. Sorry about that. Anyway, yeah, I like that, I like that. I don't really want to go any lower than that. That's where I'm happy. I'm going to stop right there. What I will do is I'll check a little check of what's going on here, and I'm going to do the unforgivable, the unspeakable, the incredible. I'm going to open up these slots because, contrary to popular belief, there is no good reason for them to be deep and sticky, if you get what I mean. So I'm going to use this little V file. Just I'm carefully watching my progress. Thankfully, or helpfully, there's a bit of grime at the bottom here to tell me how things are going. So I'm just want to have not not really going to do anything else other than opening that up so that it isn't catching. It's not catching, and this file is really good for that. Now, some people get all freaked out because they don't like the look of the snaggle tooth look, but I would prefer any day to have free running slots than to have deep, pretty looking trenches. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, my normal thing is, if you don't like that look, I would go function over form every day, and what I would do is reduce the height of the nut generally, so that I can see. If I get I was going to get my close-up camera out. Yoo-ha! My special high-tech, sort of high-tech. Let's make it work. It's got a macro-y type thing on. Oh, it's running. Oh, it's gone straight to camera mode. I know there's no SIM card. It's a camera. It goes to video. Come on, you can do it. Can't you? Oh my god, that was quick. So, hello. Don't bother with your Apple ID rubbish. Okay, alright, let's have a look. Now I am in sort of, no. Right, let's get this business of trying to log me onto Apple out of the way. No. And now we can use, god, this is so tedious. No, I'm not entering the password for the 50th time. Now I can zoom in. Hey, look at the slots. So what we've got here is a little V-shaped slot which opens up either side of the string, therefore not gripping it. Whereas this, if we can get even closer, I don't know how close we can get. No, that's about it. This little baby here is deep slot that the string's sitting right down into, and it will be grabbing it and gripping it. Same with these. So that's the plan, is to just free up. Not so bad on these particular ones here, but pretty bad on those. So I don't like to see those. Oh look, it can't focus anymore. Oh yeah, it can. Sort of wide angle really. Hey, look while we're at it. The new big roomy shed with almost no things in it. Well, can I see anything? No, can't see a damn thing. While my guitar gently weeps. Anyway, you saw it on 2 videos there. That was my left-handed attempt at While My Guitar Gently Weeps a bit earlier on. I hope you were impressed. I think I could almost go and perform that live if I had to. If I was at George Harrison's anniversary concert. I would go and do it. If I had to do it, I'd play it like left-handed, just like that. Anyway, it's quite funny to try and do it. I mean, it's not like playing the other way around. It's playing right-handed, but left-handed chords, which is just weird. So just, as I say, opening these slots up so that we don't get any sticking. That sounds good. Just a tiny tweak really, more than anything, but I just... And in my list of priorities that I talk about a lot, the guitar that stays and plays in tune is the most important thing, or the ability to stay in tune and play in tune is the single most important quality that a guitar can have. You know, what it actually looks like is really irrelevant, and it's funny because I always say that when I was growing up, and a lot of people I hung around with who were guitar fanatics, their priority list, you know, seemed to be hell-bent on the brand, the look. Yeah, the brand, the look, the type of pickups, and so on. And after kind of a few years of doing this, what I realised is that actually, as kids, as youngsters, we tend to get the priorities the wrong way around, almost 100% back to front, meaning that, you know, as a nowadays, if I think about what it is that makes me take a guitar off the peg and play it repeatedly, it almost universally is the fact that it stays and plays in tune, and I'll go for that above anything else. Now, as I'm just doing this, I'm just checking to see how smoothly the tuning works. I want to hear it and feel it being completely linear like this. With no pings. Yeah, so the priority order that I've found out is a guitar that plays in tune and stays in tune. The second most important thing is that it's light and easy to play, and it's not fighting you in terms of its action. When that happens, you know, people just leave it, they give up guitaring altogether, as I keep hearing from people who've tried it and just can't face it. Why am I doing that? Because I'm taking these off next, aren't I? Yes, I am. Do it right now. Might do. Yeah, why not? Shall we take it off? Yeah. So no, actually, I'm going to leave it on until they actually need to take it off. Yeah. So a guitar that first of all plays and stays in tune. Second one is that it's easy to play. It doesn't fight you in terms of the action. It doesn't tire you out as well. Not only that, a little additional thing to that is it doesn't have to be held up while you're practicing or playing with other people. Like so. An SG is just impossible because you have to hold the thing, or most SGs anyway, you have to hold the thing up in order to play it, which is a complete nightmare. So first of all, play and stay in tune. Secondly, can I even switch it on? Play and stay in tune, easy to play. Third one. Third one is it sounds great. Yeah, we'll nearly get to the end of my list. Third one is that it sounds great. Fourth one is what it looks like. And finally, least important, is what it says on the headstock. And I found that over time that has become the rule of thumb for me. And it also kind of explains why when people bring guitars and they say to me, I've got this Fender such and such, but I can't play it. I play my Jim Deacon instead, or I play my vintage such and such, you know, vintage brand, or I play my Encore, this, that, and the other, much more. And it kind of bears out in my own experience, but also when I talk to other people. So when I set things up, I'm looking to do it in that order. So the first thing I make sure is that it stays and plays in tune as an absolute priority. If it doesn't, then, you know, there's no point sending it back to you, because and the thing that you have to do to make it stay and play in tune is get the nut slots right and get rid of the slack in the strings, and that really does the job. It's also why, by the way, functionally this thing is so absolutely brilliant. I just put new strings on half an hour ago. Stayed in tune right from the off. That's because this bridge does it. So that stays in tune brilliantly, and that's why I like to practice, rehearse and gig with this more and more, because it's just in tune the whole time and I don't have to worry about it, and sounds great and feels nice to play. And then, you know, do what you can to improve the sound quality of the pickups, and after that, you know, it kind of helps it looks nice. And the last thing of all is what's on the headstock, really. You know, it doesn't make that much difference. Just try to lower this down a bit. This is a bit of a worn out old thing. Right, the kind of maximum thingy loweringness. There you go. Anyway, yeah, so kind of get it in that order, which also means you can get a no-name brand, even something that looks kind of completely bizarre. You might think this does, I personally don't, but you might think it does. And you can take care of the important bits, making it stay and play in tune, and then you have yourself an absolutely brilliant playing guitar to enjoy. There you go. Anyway, I will see you later at the end of the weekend. I'm going to take this back into its box. See you at the end of the weekend, where I do a bit of nitro, possibly a bit of nitro on the back there, and I'll obviously tape off the whole thing, and we'll get it back to a nice fresh feel for the hand, a satin feel under the fingers. But that's now set up nicely. Bit of action reduction, slots slightly eased off so they don't catch and cause detuning problems, and obviously when we take the strings off at the end of it all, I'll oil the board as well and clean up the whole guitar headstock as well, because it's got a load of fingerprints on it. There we go. Alright, so see you in a bit. Hello, well, back with James's Luna Faith Luna Faith Venus. It's not Luna. Why do I keep saying that for? It's a Venus. Faith. Luna's a different brand of guitar, isn't it? Oh my god. Anyway, sorry. It's a Faith. Anyway, back with this guitar, paying attention to what brand it is. We've got on the back here, we've got the, what's the word? Re-polyed neck, built up in colour as well, because the original lacquer was coloured, tinted, amber tinted. So in taking the old grotty lacquer off, we've obviously taken some of the colour off, which you see very quickly. I've taken the old strings off just now, because now we're at the stage where there's only a short update today, but I'm going to do a little bit of sanding, very light gauge sanding, to just flatten this off prior to later on tonight, in the dead of night. I'm going to do some nitro spraying. So we've got some very good quality satin nitro, which makes a nice finish like this stuff here. So it just means that as a top coat, it's going to go take it back, because I can't really get. I could do it with wire wool. I'll give you an example actually. Since I've got a wire wool, I can take it back to a sort of soft satin with wire wool, but it's kind of different. Now it's not entirely flat, there's a couple of little bits sticking out, but if I were to just take it back to a satin feel with wire wool, it's actually quite a nice feel anyway. So it definitely takes it away from the gloss finish that it's got, or that it otherwise would have. So yeah, it's an acceptable finish to play, but I think I'll go for the dry, that nice dry satin finish that you get with a spray. So my main purpose here isn't to finish off right now, it's to just take back this last bit of poly with a very fine paper, and this is extremely fine. I want my, what do you call it, kitchen roll standing by. So the aim of this is to make sure that we're smooth before we go to a final spray, and it's 1500 grit. And I'm concentrating as well just on this join here at the top, so there's a smooth kind of join. That's the word I'm looking for. Now this bit in a way is easier to do because it's, the neck is a nice smooth curve. The more difficult part is going to be the heel down there, which I'll have to sort of concentrate on separately. But there's the first sort of sand back. Again, you can still see there's probably room, if I was being precise about this, we could probably layer on some more deeper coloured poly here, but I'm not going to, because we just could be there forever trying to match up the colours. You know, one of the downsides of having whatever the James's hand cream originally did to the original poly, it kind of puts you in a situation where you either strip the whole area and recolour the whole area, or you just do a part of it, in which case you will get sort of join marks. It's inevitable. You can't. The eye is incredibly sensitive to colour and blemishes, so you can't. Short of redoing the whole neck from ground up, and that would mean literally stripping it back to wood and then trying to recreate as near as possible a nice, I don't know what the word would be, a nice sepia I was going to say, but it isn't sepia, you know what I mean, a nice amber finish from scratch. That would be the only way of really doing it. And then your main job would be trying to blend that in with the body of the guitar. So I would rather stick to having bulk of the colour come from the original, and you can see there's a little bit of change in colour there, but as I say, short of completely stripping it, you'll be a hard push to build that up again. But what I'm concerned about right now is just to get this down to a really smooth finish, and then we'll add later on a couple of layers of nitro, satin nitro, which will make it feel a lot smoother and nicer. It'll be a nice finish, and we'll go right up to the edge as well with that, and since the fingerboard is currently masked off. So at this stage in sanding, it's very light. I'm just concentrating on the feel, so that the underlying surface that we're going to spray onto later on is good and smooth. But like I say, it isn't perfectly coloured. I just have to accept that fact. You could see as soon as I started taking off the original poly finish to get down through the sort of sticky stuff, you could see straight away, you could see the amber coming off on the sandpaper. So the colour was mainly achieved by an amber tint in the original poly, which is quite common. Obviously guitar wood isn't naturally necessarily this colour. Okay, so it's not all that bad considering, and it's more importantly it's built up a fairly thick layer of poly over the original stuff that we had to sand back. It isn't perfect, but it's going to feel better than it would have done otherwise. Like I say, the only way, I found this out the hard way plenty of times in the past, the only way you get to a kind of perfect refinish is to strip the whole thing back, because obviously when you do that you're in charge of how you colour the whole thing from the ground up in one go, and that then makes a consistent colour. The really tricky part about any kind of hand finishing, or sorry, spot repairs is probably a better term. The tricky part about spot repairs is that you can almost never blend with an existing colour, whether it's a tint of amber or an actual flat colour or something. It's so difficult to make an invisible join, and you just wouldn't bother. If you had time and whatever to do it, you'd refinish the whole lot. Now this would obviously be a completely different cost to refinish this neck, because the amount of time, it's a fair amount of time anyway, but the amount of time to totally refinish it would be, yeah, it would be more. We're not far off actually, but it's a different matter if you go back to wood and start again. So we try not to do that here. But it's a future option, if a kind of precise colour matching is what James wants. But as I said, anyway, it's like sounding apologetic for it, but it is inherent in the way that the colour is built up on the original, which is layers of stained poly. This is proving to be a pain. Believe it or not, you can put more force on with one of these than you can sometimes with a handheld when you get a screw that has to be pushed to come out. Okay. So this, I'm taking this off so I can get a clear run at the back. Also so I can polish the front of the headstock. One of the nice things you can do when you're cleaning up a guitar for somebody is take the tuners off and give the headstock a good polish up, because there's no way you can get in there with the tuners still on. It's just never a complete clean, so it's a nice thing. But since we need these out of the way anyway to make sure we get a good edge with the finish, there's going to have to be a bit of a dusting across the join. Again, I could go over the whole lot, that would be a more precise or a cleaner sort of finish, but I'm going to see whether it's possible to just go up to the join line, but I've got to soften that off a little bit still. There's a little bit of, you can see the lacquer, the poly join at the moment. So what I'll do is I'll wait till later this evening. Hopefully the humidity will continue going down because it's drying out a little bit. When it does, I'll be able to spray this tonight. So just feeling where we've got, that all feels nice and smooth. Happy with that, nothing getting in the way. Now obviously what I want to do is just, I don't want to take any more, hardly as little more finish off as possible, because I repaired it with tinted poly as well, so there's a mixture. I built it back up the same way as it was put on, so the colour the existing colour is a product of building up tinted finish, and that's obviously done with guesswork. Now what I'm going to do is just use a bit of fresh water now just to clean any sanded residue off, ready for later on, and I'll obviously polish it again or dust it again before I do any spraying later on. And I'm just cleaning this up for now. I'm going to hang this safely out of the way next when I'm sure it's dry. So right now it doesn't matter what the finish looks like, although it's quite silky now, because you'll see that I don't want to do any more, but a 1000 grit, a 1500 grit paper will actually make this thing look like satin anyway, but it doesn't quite have the same rough feel that this comes with. So since I've got nitro, satin nitro, which does give that feel, I thought I'll use that to finish off with and get that last little finish. Now we've also got here a little sort of crossover, which we might be able to take out with careful use of blade, which is not actually performing correctly because this is a little bit on the sticky side, which we don't really want. Funnily enough though, it is almost better to have a little bit of fluff, a buzz, kind of, I don't know what the word would be, a bit of loose edge to the tape, because that actually allows the tape to lift and you get a little bit of dusting rather than a straight line, so it's not a bad. Maybe we'll do that later on. Just come back. Actually, you know what? Let's take this off for now. We'll come back and redo it in a straight line when the time is right. I mean, again, with this, it probably will look better going right up to the edge. But can't really do it on both sides. So we'll take this off for now, and we'll put some fresh on tonight. That allows all of this to dry out as well, so we don't trap any moisture in there. That's probably the best idea. And one of the things it's worth pointing out is that any matte or satin or semi-matte or whatever you call it, satin finish inevitably goes glossy over time as it gets worn. You can't keep that matte finish forever, unfortunately. Just the way it is. In terms of when you move, hand movements, repetitive brushing, rubbing, just basically polishes out the matteness of it, and you end up with shiny paint again, or shiny finish. So it's only ever a temporary thing. Okay, so there we are, ready for some spray tonight. All of this is still looking good. We're well masked off here. In terms of cleaning the front, I'll do that later, but I'll just use some scratch remover on there later on. Okay, we won't need any more of this, so that's kept for another day. Somewhere else. That didn't work very well. A pile of things waiting to go in the bin. Right, so off to one side. Okay, that's it. See you later on, or see you after. Maybe I'll show you later on in the dead of night. Okay. So here we are, getting this guitar ready, excuse me, for a bit of nitro spray. So I've basically wiped any dust off, ready to go, and masked off and clothed off anything that's going to need protecting off. And it's going to take place over here. Also, I think I'm going to need to cover up little seedlings that I've got in here, which is a bit unusual for me because I don't normally have the wife's growing things in the shed. But so I will cover those up. Also cover the chair up, the seat thing. Hellfire. I can't cover these up. I'm going to have to go outside until this is done. Get a little bit of water in while they're at it. So, the lengths you have to go to. And while I'm at it, I will need a mask as well. By the way, do you like the Wesley as it's coming along? It's new bridge. Ta-da! I was going to go headless on this, but I've ended up going with a gold bridge, fixed bridge, which is going to need to be stuck on as well as screwed down. But the fun part is this. Ta-da! Ooh, funky. Just for fun. Come on. It's terrible. Anyway, we'll leave that down here. That neck is going to get reused. That's the point about it. Is it's not. I'm not being too precious with it. I literally don't think don't think that, hang on, where's my good goggles? I don't think that that's going to stay like that for long, but I will reuse the neck on a headless guitar. Now I need to find my goggles. Where's the ones I had most recently? And what did they look like? Where have they gone? Is that an old one? There's... I guess this is my more recent one. Yes. Shake the spiders out of it. So I'm currently warming up the lacquer.
We're at 67 in the humidity department. I'm not doing that much actually compared to some of the other guitars I did end of the year, whenever it was. So, fluff got away. So what I really want to do is, I want to do it where there's some good light. Which isn't really here. There, that's to cover up the dust. You'll be able to see what I'm doing really. The light isn't fantastic around here. That's a little... 1 second. Before I do anything else, there's a tiny little raised fleck, a tiny bit of poly on here. I don't want to be there before I spray. That's good. Got rid of that. Plants outside. Sensitive things. To disguise this. Okay. Don't freak my neighbours out. Cut. Should do this for some time. I'm going to take the thing on pause. Hold on. I guess we're running. I can't see very well. First, satin. So I'm going to go, going to just let that dry, and then we'll do a couple more. So just tipping over a little bit to do the edges, backwards and forwards. You can still see the colour difference where the original colour came out. You know, like I say, it's about the best you can do. Satin. quite difficult to recolour it without doing the whole thing. So. Side. And then this side. Tap on there properly. Okay. That's basically what I'm going to do every half an hour. Keeping an eye on the humidity, sorry, which is quite low, surprisingly, considering the weather, so isn't doing so bad. It always looks a bit gloss when it goes on, but it settles back to being a nice satin flat colour, like the new router table now. Look at that baby under there. Able to flat off some pieces to join them like this one here, like those there, which I'll do tonight as well. Sorry, it sounds not very good, so I'll leave it at that. You see what I'm doing.
This thing just doesn't behave itself. I apologise. Right, plug in and sort of charge or something. Right, here's James's Faith, and there's the satin neck resprayed. Colour isn't perfect, like I pointed out in the beginning. It isn't going to be, I'm afraid, short of a complete refinish back to wood, and that would be everything. So I'm kind of happy with the way it's come out. So what I'm going to do now is, I think it's time to move swiftly on to putting it back together again, because we've got to get it back in tomorrow. But it's I sprayed it yesterday, or the last. I did the kind of polyurethane, whatever it's called, polyurethane finish last week. Let it dry, then sanded it back a little bit and did some nitro spray last night, and it's 2 or 3 coats, maybe actually 3 or 4, probably more like in the end, and it's given it a nice finish. So we have the guitar now ready to basically restring and get ready to go. Now you can see that in order to do sanding no, spraying and stuff, I took out the tuners, so I'm going to put these back now. I took them out obviously to give me room to do the finish, but also so I could give the headstock a nice clean at the same time, which is always a nice touch. So I'm just going to put things back together, and we'll just basically restring, because everything we've done in terms of the new playing action and so on is already done. It's just waiting now to have the strings reloaded, or a set of strings reloaded, and then we'll see what the neck settles down to, and if it needs a truss rod adjustment or not. Assuming, never a good thing, but assuming that they're the same gauge as before, then we shouldn't see much change, if any. So it's ready to go home, and it will hopefully be a pleasant surprise for James, because it wasn't playing when it arrived, for sure, so it's going to be a massive improvement on that alone. So first thing we do is flip it over. There's a somewhere in this pile of stuff here. Oh, it's in the box. The strap button is inside. Okay, so anyway, I'll go and get that in a minute, but meanwhile, here's my thingies. Tuner screws. Make a small set of a small driver. Stick it down to the lowest torque and line everything up. Now the gap between, or the crossover, I've just left, haven't done any sanding in the crossover between where the nitro meets the poly, the satin nitro meets the satin poly. I've left it because it would be more noticeable to sand it. So I did a very small dusting yesterday, so it's kind of relatively well blended in. It's not perfect, but you know, this is a rescue job more than an expensive refinish. So great little torque unit, this Bosch screwdriver. Most of these I've destroyed fairly quickly in one way or another, but this one has performed brilliantly for a good couple of years now. So hearty recommendation. It's PSR 7 it was called. I think it's a 7.5 lithium powered thing. And I don't think they do a 7.5 one. In fact, I know they don't, because I looked for one for my stepmom the other day, and she ended up having to have the modern-er one, which I think was 18 volts. I don't think you had a choice in the matter. Okay, so I'm just going to tighten these, tune this up. Now they're positioned correctly and tuner screws are in place. Now we can do the extra tightening here. Okay, guitars always pick up gunge. Right, so we are, it's official, left-handed. So our high bit starts down that end. And we get our nice elixir. Elixirs worry me a little bit, only because I've had too many fake ones, I've got to say. So I try to be careful, or use somewhere like Amazon or some real world shop to buy them from, because I've had fake ones before, and then I've kind of complained to the seller on eBay, and they've, you know, very promptly and decently not refunded, replaced them, but they tend to sort of keep replacing them with the same stock, which, if they've got a big batch of fake ones, I have a feeling that they've just kept on churning out the fakes, which is no good to me. So okay, so here we go. So I go all the way on, back one, hold it down, start winding, and I go over the top of the loose string with the held. Press it down, and it comes round, and it goes under the spare string on the way round. I can work that up a little bit. And then it sort of locks it off. It's quite a neat little deal. And then we can just snap right there. Okay. I won't do the truss rod. Sorry, I won't put the cover on yet, because as you know, I may need to make an adjustment there. So I've been outside today routing guitar bodies, which is always a nice spring feeling thing for me. God, feels like the weather's changing a little bit today. All it means is, in the UK, is it's stopped raining and it's a little bit warmer. But thankful for very small mercies over here. So as soon as the weather's dry and relatively warm, I'm out there trying out some new, my handheld router, the little handheld trimmer, as opposed to the big Makita, which is currently doing service under the in the router table as a jointer at the moment. So I've glued a body today. I've flattened the base of a body today, and I have also routed the weight relief in that base. It's an oak base, so I've routed the weight relief in it, which is, well, cool this time. I'm making sure I know where those relief holes are, so I don't make the mistake I made a couple of years ago, where I put weight relief in the guitar and then promptly forgot, as I put the top on and clamped it, I forgot where the weight relief was, and the result was when I actually came to drilling pockets and cavities and stuff in the finished slab, I ended up going through to some of these hidden weight relief chambers, which of course I had no idea where they were, so ended up with some kind of odd pockets and holes here and there. It was quite fun. Good guitar to play, but just a bit peculiar. Okay, here we go. Right, not far off now. Like I said, when you use any finish, if you use a matte or a satin finish, you have to remember it will eventually over time become shiny, because when it's matte, it's just a shinier version of, sorry, a flatter version, a grittier finish. I don't know how, I have no idea how it actually achieves it compared to, you know, what makes it go matte or satin as opposed to gloss, but whatever the surface is that gives you that satin finish, it will, with use, rub its way to being a gloss again. And if that's not to your liking, then you need to periodically scuff it up or respray it or whatever. A lot of people regularly use sandpaper on all their guitars. They'll have a grade, a particular grade, or wet and dry I should say, but they have a particular grade that they like the feel of, and they'll do the back of their neck with that, and that will be it for the playing feel. And it stops the slippiness that people don't like, the stickiness I should say. It makes it slippier, less sticky. You get kind of sticky with gloss. Right, make sure those are all in. Spares done, leftovers done. I'm covered in sawdust. So, as with all really strong guitars, I'm going to do a little bit of stretching, thumb and forefinger stuff, just to get this settled in, bedded in, and make sure that when it goes back to James, it's going to stay and play and stay in tune. That's the main thing. Makes a big difference when you've worked on someone's guitar to ensure that it goes back in that kind of condition. Miles off, I'm sure, but it's a start. Come on then. Oh, this thing is so knackered. I've got to get another battery for it, poor thing. down in there. Get down in there. I'm not going to do too many stretchings with these strings for the simple reason they're expensive, and quite frankly, if I bust an E on these, I can't replace them because A, I don't have any elixirs in stock, and B, I'd be out of business having to replace a whole set each time I bust one of these strings tuning it, so I've got to be as careful as I can be. So it might need a little bit of bedding in still when it gets home. I'm going to blame the expensive strings. Quick check of how everything, don't forget I've got to put the screw in, the strap in. Okay, I'm done, ladies and gentlemen. I'll take it in, put it in the box, put the strap button on, put it in the box, and we're done. That's good, it's how I wanted it. Let's just check, I'll do a quick double check of the... It's got quite a nice amount of relief. That's good, happy with that. Right, the thingy is in the thingy and back inside, so I'll take that in. So, very quickly, just want to say, I've dropped my power cable again. There you go. The Lunar, sorry, no, it's not Lunar. It's a Faith. I keep saying Lunar. It's the Faith Jupiter Natural. No, it's not Jupiter. I keep, forgive me, I've said it wrong all the time. It's a Venus. Bang my head. You know, planets. It's a planet. It's a Faith. It's the Venus. It's the Fire. Made in Indonesia, handcrafted in Indonesia, natural series, left-handed, lovely thing. We've got a wasp finding its way in here right now. Just to quickly show you, there's the old routing stuff today. Really can't really see it, but there's the weight relief in the base of what's going to be T7, the Telecaster body, and there's the top of that guitar. But it needs another 6 or so millimeters thinning down on the top, and then I've got another piece over here gluing in the meantime, which is quite a nice piece, but don't know how long, I don't know what we'll get out of it. We shall see. It'd be bonus if we get an extra guitar out of 1 or 2 book match pieces. Anyway, thank you for watching this one. Sorry it was a bit iffy. You didn't really see the spraying, much of the spraying, or you didn't see much of the hand finishing, but I don't know how well you can see it now, but let's see if the light of day shows it up. But there you go, you can see a light spot on there underneath the nice satin finish, but it's got a nice sheen to it. Feels great to play, but you can see it's kind of impossible to get it right back to the original colour without you know, without seeing the join. That's the problem, as I was talking about yesterday. You can overcome that if you refinish the whole thing and start the colouring from the ground up. So you go back to bare wood basically, and you treat everything with the same amount of tint. which is how they built it up in the first place. But when we're doing a spot repair, if you like, and not doing the entire refinish on this, then we don't have a choice, and it's a matter of stripping it back to remove the damaged stuff, and that goes back, in terms of the poly that it takes off, that goes back as far as it has to remove the damaged stuff. Now in this case, it took as soon as you start sanding it, you have no choice. It takes the colour, because the colour is in the poly, it's not the stain in the wood. It's in the tinted lacquer. So as soon as you, well, tinted poly. So as soon as you take that off, you start to lose the colour, and then, you know, either you do it the whole thing back to wood, if you like, or the same amount, which is hard to judge unless you hit the wood. You know, you're forced to, or you're basically forced to work in attempt to blend and match. But I think, you know, playing it, it feels great. Looking at it, it's not too bad, and you know, you've got the feel back, and I've removed the naff spongy poly that was in there. Okay, that's it for now. I'm going to see if I can remember it's a Faith and it's Venus. Yes, and it's a left-handed.